Thanks for tuning in and watching again. So I'm just going to quickly go through my list of parts here, which I'm going to be using to do my turbo conversion to my 3-litre SC. For those that haven't seen the other two videos, it's pretty boring, but I'll just show you that I'm pulling the engine out of the car. It's a 1979 3-litre SC. It's running the stock CIS injection, and my goal is to convert it to a turbo and to also use electronic fuel injection at the same time. So I've already started doing the wiring harness. As you can see, I'm using the ECU Master EMU Black. Hopefully you can see that in the photo. It's a nice little chunky little unit. So that's done. I've done the first half of the wiring harness, which is all the wires from the ECU, which are going to go to the connector on the engine. I haven't put the final connector in yet because I still need to do some final fitment in place. And there's my busman relay, which I'm using to provide power to all the sensors and equipment on the engine. So the first thing that sticks out is the exhaust. So this is basically a stock 3-litre SC heat exchanger system. And the reason I'm using this is because I wanted to retain heat on the off chance that I do my big drive to the south of Australia, which I've been planning for years, and it's going to be cold. So I want to make sure I've got heat. The car does not have air conditioning at the moment, but I do want heat. So what I've done is I've had the original heat exchangers ceramic coated. Couple of reasons. One, I wanted them to be completely clean. That way there's nothing that's going to be blown through to damage the turbo. And also it looks pretty. So I've ended up sourcing this J pipe. So this is an original 930 J pipe, which I sourced from a fellow in the United States. Couldn't find one locally for a decent price, and so I ended up importing one. So that's what I'm using here. The turbo itself. Now I haven't gone and spent gazillions of dollars on a turbo. This is a Garrett copy. It's made by a company called Pulsar, and I'm sure plenty of people have heard of Pulsar turbos. They seem to be well made. I know nothing about them. This is a 3076. So yeah. So the idea was I'm going to be running a low boost setup. The engine has not been rebuilt by me. So I'm going to be doing this in stages. The first stage is to convert it to turbo and get it running reliably and have it tuned. And then the next stage, once I'm happy with everything, is I'll probably rebuild the engine later in 2024 and worry about increasing performance then. At the moment, I just want it to work and to be reliable. So I'm using a Pulsar turbo because they're affordable. They're sort of, from what I can understand, what I've been reading on Pelican Parts, a lot of people are using them and they work, and they're probably the highest quality Chinese turbo you can buy. Don't quote me on that, I don't know, I'm just going off what I'm reading. So that's the turbo side. Now, some of the parts I've bought also, this is going to be my oil feed line, which I bought this from TurboCraft, from Chris Carroll and the guys at TurboCraft in the US. So this is going to fit on the top of the engine where the idiot light normally fits. That's going to take its place. There is there's a one-way valve in there, a ball and a spring, and then the idiot light sensor is going to screw into the top of that. And then this is going to drape over the top of the engine, and that's going to feed the turbo. Okay, and the the drain for the turbo, well, at first I thought I was going to use this. So I also bought this from TurboCraft, so that's the oil accumulator or reservoir or drain, I'm not sure what you call it, and that would normally feed to a pump, which would then suck and then return it back somewhere to the top of the engine somewhere. Now, because I'm using a ball bearing turbo, and this isn't one of the older journal bearings, the amount of oil that's going to go through it is apparently a lot less, and they tell me that I can probably run gravity feed to the sump fairly successfully. So that's what I'm going to do first. So this isn't going to be utilised to start with. I am going to use this sump plate. So this is a plate that was made by another fellow on Pelican Parts, a nice piece, pretty chunky. So that's designed to fit on the bottom. It'll clear a 3.2 oil pump with the screen, and it will have a drain plug on one side, and it has a fitting, a thread on the other side where you can fit an AN fitting to run the drain line. So that's what I'm going to use there. Haven't used it before, but I'm sure it will work. For the trigger for my EFI conversion, I've decided to use this. So this is from a company called Adapt Motorsport. You can look them up, Google them, and they sell this little crank trigger. So it's a combined unit with 2 Hall effect sensors. This will plug into the distributor mounting point on the engine. I've bought a new drive gear, which will go in here with a pin, and this Hall effect sensor here will actually mount on. This will actually read the trigger wheel off the back of this pulley. So that's going to give me my flywheel rotation. That's a 60-2 gear. So that's going to mount there. And then inside where which runs off here is another Hall effect sensor, and that's going to give me my camshaft position. So these will be wired into the factory harness to give me my primary and secondary triggers. And what else is required on the EFI conversion? Well, lots of stuff really. But while we're here, we'll still talk about mufflers. I bought this, I picked it up secondhand. This is a turbo muffler, which I may or may not use because it weighs an absolute ton. And I also picked up one of these FabSpeed Zork pipes, or Zork tubes, I think they call them. This is going to need adaptation or cutting off and welding on a 3-inch V-band to mount to the turbo. That's all stuff which I'll probably have to get someone else to do because my welding doesn't weld, it just blows holes everywhere. So I'm going to be using the 3.2 Carrera intake system, and I plan to use the stock fuel rails and the stock throttle body. What I have bought is, there's a company here, EFI Hardware, and you can see that, efihardware.com. So they sell a little adapter plate which is meant to allow you to mount a throttle position sensor to the side of the throttle body. So that'll get rid of this wide open switch, so all of that stuff will come off. So that's for the throttle position. The injectors that I'm planning to use are these Bosch injectors, which I've bought from Rama at RHD Engineering in Australia. So these are 443cc injectors. I don't know what that is in pounds or whatever, but I'm fairly certain that for the modest power I'm expecting to make, these will be more than satisfactory. The fuel pressure will be regulated by this unit. So this is again from Adapt Motorsport, and I've bought this one because I'm using the original 3.2 fuel system. This fuel pressure regulator will mount in the back, and I'll be able to adjust the fuel pressure without having to mount it somewhere else in the engine bay. Again, the only reason I'm using this one is because I'm using the original 3.2 injection system. I have got myself a fuel pressure sensor from Rama at RHD, and that'll mount in the side there. Hopefully, I mean, I haven't really mocked everything up, but I'm hoping there's room on the back of where this mounts for that fuel pressure sensor to stick out. So that's fuel pressure. Air intake temperature sensor, of course. NOx sensor. So I'm going to run a single NOx sensor, and the plan at this stage is to mount the NOx sensor on the base of the throttle plate, which mounts to the top of the engine, which seems to be a fairly common place to mount them. So that's what I'm planning to do there. Coils. So I'm using these Bosch coils. You can see the part number there. But I've used these before on a couple of EFI conversions, and so far they seem to work well, so I'm going to use them. And a map sensor. Now, I know that the Emu Black has an onboard map sensor, and I believe it's a 4-bar map sensor. The reason I'm using an external sensor is I just didn't feel comfortable running a hose from the ECU inside the car underneath the seat all the way through the firewall and into the engine bay, just in case something got kinked or if there was ever a leak or damage and whatnot. I just figured it was a lot safer for me to run a sensor in the engine bay. So I'm going to run this Bosch sensor. It's only a 3-bar sensor, but again, I'm only planning to run at this stage half a bar of boost. So I'm fairly certain this will accommodate my needs perfectly. Again, going back to the intake, to make the Carrera intakes work with my head, so these have a 42mm opening on the bottom. and the heads that I'm using are what we call the big port heads, which have a 39mm intake. So what I've ended up buying are these intake adapters, and again, these are made, well, I'm not sure who makes them, but I bought them from Turbocraft in the US, and you can see they're made out of two, they look like about 7 or 8mm thick laminates, which are glued together, and they're machined. So these are designed to adapt, I think it's to adapt these intakes to a 930 head. And what I'm going to do is, because my heads are much bigger ports here, I'm going to use the gasket to trace where it mates to my head here, and then also make sure that this one mates to the top here. I'm just going to Dremel these out and blend them so that I have a nice straight shot from the Carrera intake to my head. So again, these are the only ones they sell, but they do say that you're supposed to Dremel these out so that you can adapt the Carrera intake. And of course, you're going to have to use the Carrera intake gasket on the top and my 3-litre SC gaskets on the bottom to make that mate perfectly well. This is a boost solenoid, and again, I've never used anything like this before, but it's a 3-port Mac valve, I think they call it, and the idea is I'm going to use this to help control boost. The only thing I haven't pictured in this little video is the wastegate, which is going to mount here. Now the reason for that is it's on order and it's sitting in the US somewhere waiting to come here, and I've just ordered the standard, how do you say it, teal or T-I-A-L or tile. It's an F46P, and it's apparently they're designed perfectly for these because they're quite narrow on the body. They've had a lot of the fins machined off so that it actually fits in that tight confine. So that's it. This is my little project for the next month, I guess. The big part was wrapping my head around doing the wiring over here, and again, I'm only halfway through. Once I have all of the hardware mounted to the engine, I then have to construct the engine harness, which will mate to the car harness. So yeah, by no means is this designed to tell you what to do or how to do it, because I'm admitting I have absolutely no idea. I can build an engine all day long, but this is completely new to me. But I'm hoping to take it fairly methodically and step by step. And if I think it through and ask questions along the way, then I'm fairly certain it should work reasonably well. Anyway, thanks for watching, and yeah, see you in the next video.